Hello and welcome to Host in HR with me, Leon Morley, founder of HR Recruitment Solutions. Today I've got a fantastic panel of L&D experts that are here to take your questions. So what I'm looking for people to do is to send their questions to us. Now, to be a little bit of an incentive for you, I'm running a prize draw, and the prize draw is for anybody who gets involved, asks a question of the panel, likes, subscribes, notifies, whatever they want to do, but basically gets involved with the show. And the prize is, wait for it, a copy of the Learning and Development Handbook written by Michelle Parry-Slater. So Michelle is one of our panelists. So Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about the book and a little bit about yourself as well, please?
Of course, thank you. Great to be here. And I'm really excited to be here talking about the book, but talking about other stuff as well. The book came about because I am very practical L&D, working in HR and L&D. And I'm really keen that we have, it's called Practitioner's Handbook. And we have an approach which is very focused on how to do stuff. So a lot of time in L&D, we say, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, we should be doing the other. How to do stuff. That's what the book's about, and that's what I'm about. So I've worked in consultancy for a number of years, helping organizations to move from face-to-face learning and add digital and social learning into that mix. I now do that for the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, and their commercial learning content manager, and really excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Leon.
Yeah, no worries. I was reading the book. I like the fact you had the short segment, you had the Twitter bit on there as well, which so people can obviously follow you on there as well, and then the long read for those wanting to go into more detail. So yeah, it's certainly a great prize, so please do get your questions over to us. So let's introduce our other guests today. So let's go ladies first, I suppose. So Sarah, please do tell us and introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks so much, Leon. Thanks so much for having me. So Sarah Schwab is my name. I'm founder and CEO of an edtech startup company called the Experience Accelerator. I've got 25 years in the field of management and leadership development. And I guess the one thing you should know about me is I'm really passionate about great leadership behaviors. And so where I spend most of my time now is in a quick cycle, learn, practice, feedback model to help leaders and managers be better at work. And we know that everyone benefits if you have a great manager with great leadership behaviors. So I'm thrilled to be here today, and looking forward to learning from my panelists as well as from the audience.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well, Leon. It's a pleasure also with this panel. I think we're going to have some fun and interesting discussions. So actually I'm a human capital consultant with absolutely no human capital background. But I have been head of learning at Swisscom Enterprise customers, where I've implemented social collaborative learning with 100% user-generated content for 5,000 employees. And in the past 2-3 years, I've also been active as a freelance consultant for other global organizations. And so my background is quite mixed. I've done engineering, business development, sales, coaching, consulting. So, and actually through that, those mixed experiences, it really helps me to connect with the people for who I'm creating those learning experiences. And yeah, I think today is going to be very exciting, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Patrick. So obviously that's a bit more about the professional side of our guests. But what I wanted to do was to try and find out a bit more about them, maybe less of what you might see on a LinkedIn profile or something. So we're going to play a little game, and it's probably a game that you're all familiar with. And the game is called, and I'll just put a little picture up, 2 Lies and 1 Truth. So 2 lies and 1 truth. So basically what we will do is we're each going to tell 3 things about ourselves, 2 of which are complete lies and 1 is a truth. Now at the end of the show, we will announce to each other which is the one that is the truth from there. So we can all be guessing, and certainly during the back of our minds during the show, we can be thinking, I wonder which one it could be. And hopefully by the end of the show, you'll hold on and find the answers out yourself. So Who wants to go first with their 2 lies and 1 truth?
I'll go first. So, number 1, I completed a 48-hour hockey marathon that got me in the Guinness Book of Records. Number 2, I travel frequently to the Gulf, and my Arabic isn't too bad. Number 3, I have a twin sister, Sian, who used to play in a punk rock band.
Interesting.
Oh,
Okay.
Sarah, you have done that so expertly. I'm now thinking, oh my goodness, I don't even know if I believe myself.
A little. I have been rehearsing with my children who was, no, the order's all wrong, the sequencing's all wrong. So yes, I've had some expert help.
Excellent. Well, look, my ones are, I taught English in Japan. And my ones are, I've run an apprenticeship program.
Okay.
And I have my final one, and there'll probably be a giveaway sound-wise in the background. I've got 4 dogs.
Oh, okay. I've heard a dog. I don't know about 4 though. That's okay. Planning to think about. Patrick?
All right, so here goes. Here are my 3. The first one, I love Switzerland, but I dislike traditional Swiss cuisine like rösti and fondue. Second one is, I have an educational background in human resources. And the third one being, through my involvement with the Kickstarter Accelerator program, I've seen over 100 edtech startup companies succeed and fail.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So I'll tell you mine as well. So I once was kicked out of school for kicking a teacher. I have played poker with Jason Statham in Las Vegas. And I once was trying to go to Newcastle upon Tyne to see my beloved Newcastle United, and ended up in Newcastle Underline because I programmed my sat nav incorrectly. So those are my 3. Okay. Now, obviously, they will be revealed at the end of the show, so stay tuned, and we'll find out which of those truths they are. We'll do a reminder as well, so you don't need to remember them all now, but certainly have a look. Right, should we get on to the actual high quality, highbrow content of what we're delivering today?
Should we just stay?
Just
chatting
carry
about
on with
how good a
2 lies.
liar Sarah looks to be, yeah.
Definitely shouldn't have played poker with you. I think that's for sure. So the first question that I wanted to ask, and again, guys, please do get your questions across to us so we can get them across to everybody here. But first question, so Michelle, obviously founder of Kairos Modern Learning. Can you tell us what is wrong with L&D at the moment? What's wrong with the classroom-based e-learning packages? I don't understand what's wrong with that process. Can you tell me a bit more?
I think the pandemic's definitely highlighted what I've known to be true and I've been banging on about for years, which is that classroom learning isn't enough. That transactional approach to learning and development, where you go out of the office, you have a lovely lunch, you meet some lovely people, you have great biscuits and coffee. It's a great day out, but then you go back to your day job and do what you've always done. And so good learning is about behavior change. It's about actually understanding what business problem is and how you're trying to solve that business problem. And so consequently, where we stick with the transactional approach, where we've got a course catalogue and we chuck out our courses, and, it's no fault of L&D in a way, because that's what we're KPI'd on. That's what our businesses expect us to do. They want to know how many courses have you put on, how many people have been sitting in a classroom somewhere. But as I started with, the transactional approach and the pandemic, it just didn't work because we didn't have the opportunity to put people in classrooms and have nice biscuits and lovely coffee. And so we've had to move into an online space. And actually what that's enabled us to see is that this is how businesses actually work. Businesses are reactive and responsive, and learning needs to follow along suit. So I think what we've been doing for years, that classroom stuff, we need to expand and highlight into other areas.
And Michelle,
sorry. I still am waiting to meet the C-level executive that is becoming happy from seeing happy sheets.
Exactly. So for those that don't know, Patrick, you mean there's surveys at the end of our face-to-face learning, or even in fact any learning. And the only value to those really is as a facilitator in a session to get that 9 out of 10 or that 4 out of 5. It's like, oh, that's brilliant. I did a good thing today. Doesn't it? Means that you did good train attainment.
Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting name.
I just want to hop on, if I can, Leon, because Michelle and I were back and forth on Twitter today on this very subject. And I think one of the challenges is that knowledge transfer or behavioural transfer is hard. It takes time. It needs your boss's involvement. Often, the traditional way has been through coaching, which is just too expensive and doesn't scale well. And so I think what's super interesting at the moment is you're seeing a raft of technology, some good, some not so good, but who are really focused on helping to enable this knowledge transfer, this behavioural transfer that Michelle's referring to. And so I think we're going to see a lot of breakthrough solutions in the coming years that I think will help to make that knowledge transfer, behavioural transfer easier for organisations to bite off.
I think you're absolutely right, to be honest. And I think it's not just the technology, though. It's about the permissions. So the organisations themselves need to say, this is okay. It's all right not to go out and have it. You don't need to have a day out of the office in order to say that you've done some learning. You're learning all the time. And you're fitting these, sessions like this into your working day, and you're fitting in conversations that are productive, and you're fitting in reflection on stuff that you might have tried and failed at. So we're going to see an explosion, a raft of different opportunities. And the difference now is that organisations are willing to listen to it.
Do you think, you started off, Michelle, by talking a little bit about, the pandemic and the situation in terms of work. But obviously, before that, obviously some of these changes were coming in. I'm just intrigued what your thoughts are as a panel really about, is it the fact that technology has become, just the way we use technology is different, we've got more opportunities to do it that way? Is it just that we've become more aware about how people actually learn and whether this sort of classroom stuff really works for people, and if they apply what they learn in a classroom environment? Where do you think this sort of, I suppose, change is kind of, what's brought it about in terms of what, sort of digital learning and the sort of modern learning approach? This is an open question to anybody, by the way.
I'll happily jump in to Patrick. You've got a lot of good stuff to say about this. Not being from a learning background, I'm curious to see how that pans out for you.
So actually, it's just economic drivers, because, rather than putting an expensive classroom training in place, you produce an e-learning once and then you let it play 1,000 times and it doesn't cost you a single cent more. And unfortunately, this is often then the business driver for going digital. Because the value of learning is not being experienced by the business. And, the points that Michelle and Sarah were mentioning before, that's exactly the reason why the value of learning is not being seen, because the line manager is not involved in the transfer of that new knowledge towards applying it in your job and seeing an actual performance improvement. And then what we are seeing now with this pandemic, that's a whole different type of pain that is being unleashed on an organization where you cannot actually physically meet. And so they are forced to do this alternative. And what I've seen in the past year is that companies, they are just firefighting, and they are buying digital tools left, right, and center, just so that they can deliver. There is no strategy behind it. And what I think for this year is going to be a good exercise for organizations to do is to just take stock inventory and start to consolidate on what they have purchased last year and think about, well, what do we actually want, and come up with a strategy for next year.
I say, Patrick, I think you're right in that people have kind of knee-jerked and bought stuff or moved into things. And what we saw this time last year was we were heading into a pandemic a lockdown in the UK, was, oh my goodness, all my face-to-face stuff, what do I do? Well, they just ditched it online and it didn't work. And very quickly, by about July time, we could see that, and when I say we, this is research reports and literature reviews through the CIPD, we could see that it just wasn't working for people, and it doesn't work. This is an entirely different medium. And when you consider a year ago, when we ran any live online sessions, getting people to turn their mics on or getting people to turn their cameras on, that was an absolute nightmare. Nobody wanted to do that. People didn't feel comfortable speaking online. And now everyone's got their mics and cameras on. It's totally normal. Welcome to my home. It's that kind of, we've totally shifted. So I think the pandemic shifted on several levels. It shifted the learners themselves, the individuals. They're much more comfortable with the technology. It shifted the organizations because they've realized that actually this stuff works. It's easy, and to your point, Patrick, it's cheap, although I would never advocate for moving to digital learning because it's cheap. That should be one of the factors, but not your driving force. You should be offering it because it works, because it's part of a suite of other things. And I think it's also changed because now we're suddenly overcome almost. If anyone was to look at, for example, the Fosway 9 grid on learning technologies, it's packed now. There's so many different platforms and different ways that you can offer digital learning. It becomes a bit of a nightmare to work your way through it, but you can, and people will, because they've got that will.
And Michelle, just hopping on to that point, I think something that Patrick said, which is worth shining a spotlight on, is that if you don't really know where you're going, risk is you buy a bunch of stuff and it's all 50 million different logins. The learner experience is ghastly. And so tip to the wise, I think for anyone that's in L&D, the ability to triage through the morass of tech companies, ed tech companies that are out there, really make sure that whatever you're evaluating is at least in line with your broader strategy, and then figuring out how you're going to evaluate. Those three things, I think, are just absolute must-haves for L&D professionals now, because it's like a fire hose and you can get drowned quite easily, I think.
Yeah.
And Leon, if it's okay, I just would like to add something to that, because when it comes to buying tools, L&D professionals, they love to speak about, we need to buy a new LMS, and and then they start to come up with these wish lists of features that this LMS needs to have, and then they do an RFP in a very traditional sense. They do their due diligence, then they buy that solution, they implement it, and then nobody really ends up using it. And it's often because people think that if I buy an LMS, with that comes a learning culture, and this is actually the complete wrong way around, and that's why so many of these LMS implementations just absolutely fail. Because if you don't have an understanding of how do you want your organization to learn, what type of culture do we have, you can never ever find a tool that accelerates that implementation of a learning culture, because this is what any type of technology should do. It should accelerate the vision that you have. It should not be the vision itself.
Totally agree with that, Patrick. There's a chapter in my book called Environment, Permission and Culture. It's a framework that I use when I'm brought into an organization and they say, we want to buy an LMS, we want to do digital learning. You don't start there. You don't start with the tool. You start with the purpose. Why would you want to do that? What's the business problem that you're trying to solve? And what culture are you trying to evoke and build up in order for this to actually work? Because so many times, you're absolutely right, you buy the next shiny toy and then no one plays with your toys. And you really need to think about what's the environment you're putting in. It's no good, for example, buying an LMS, which is really brilliant, responsive design and works on mobile phones, if you don't actually provide a company mobile phone, or at least pay towards somebody's mobile bill, because why would they use their data to do their learning for work? And it's that type of basic level, what's the environment, what permissions are in place? Do people actually have the ability to go onto their LMS? How many times a week are you expecting them to actually interact with digital learning? And is that written into their working day, or are they fitting this around other stuff? So loads of good stuff coming out of this conversation. I'm loving it.
Yeah, so I've just put up a comment from Akua Richardson, hi. Thank you for your comments. So salient points raised, food for thought for many employers. A thought out strategy is critical going forward. I suppose my question really aligned to that is, how do you begin writing and putting together a strategy for L&D? What's the starting point? What should somebody do if they go into a new organization? Let's say they're HR director of a smaller organization, they've got L&D. Where should they start to create a good strategy? Anyone?
Yeah, let me start. I think, it has to start with a company strategy, and you have to sit down with the CEO and his or her leadership team to really understand what that strategy is, and quite simply start to understand the from to moves that you need to make in terms of as is skill set, capabilities, and what's needed in order to deliver that strategy. For me, that's probably, base number one.
Yeah, I totally agree that how on earth you can write an L&D strategy that isn't based in your business goals, then, what are you writing? And this is where I think sometimes, to what Patrick was describing earlier, people buy an LMS because their strategy is, I need digital learning, I want to buy an LMS, but it's not based in any need. So how do you know actually that's even a good spend? And considering we were talking earlier about counting, how many people do you have in an office, in a learning room every year, for example? If that's your KPI in L&D, then you're going to head down the wrong road. Your KPIs in L&D need to be your business. What are they trying to do? What's the goals around that? And that's where your strategy definitely comes from.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree to the points raised here. And I would say that there might even be a step before that, being creating transparency. So learning for me inside an organization has got nothing to do with learning at all. It's about what is the culture inside the organization, how are decisions being made, what is the type of authority that individuals are being given, and how are the different units working together? How's the collaboration? Is there a level of trust? And if you start to understand that, because this is the context in which learning is happening. And so if you can get an understanding of that, and you can start to create transparency, preferably through data analytics about how people behave, how people are learning, then you start to get a very good understanding, so that when you go to that stage about speaking to your C-suite, you already have got something in hand. And by combining those two, then you can start to really think of, well, what type of learning architecture would work for our organization, and how fast could we be moving there, so that we enable those or enable solving those business problems.
It's really important that you're talking about this to the C-suite, though, Patrick, in a language they understand, not in a learning language. And I wonder if that occurs where, if we go along and start talking about learning, what learning do you want to do? It's very difficult for people to articulate what that is. It's very difficult for them to say, I need to learn this. What they can describe is what you've just been talking about there, is what business problems do they have? And we need to do the interpretation ourselves. Whereas often we do it the other way around. We go and ask, what learning do you want? And people will just default to what they know, which is classroom, which we've always had.
Yeah, it's like the lazy salesperson who doesn't really want to do their job.
Very interesting. I was just thinking in terms of when we're talking about DigiLearning specifically. I know that particularly Patrick, with what you did with Swisscom was very, very interesting, and Sarah as well, in terms of some of the digital stuff that you've done as well. But I just wonder if you could perhaps give some examples of what actually classes as digital learning, because I don't think necessarily everybody that is aware of some of the sort of capabilities in terms of things like VR and virtual reality. I don't think they're aware necessarily of social learning platforms. Michelle, I know in your book you use lots of case examples, which is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, from your perspective, could perhaps Sarah, maybe if you talk about some of the stuff you do from digital, and we can kind of go around and perhaps give some examples of what digital learning and DigiLearning actually is.
Well, let me start with virtual reality, which I think is starting to find its space and momentum. And we waited the longest time to get a long cycle proper research study on VR effectiveness, and thankfully our friends at PwC came out with something a few months ago, and they were able to do a long cycle study around behavioral skills using VR. And they were able to see that VR was faster than classroom and e-learning. Learners were more emotionally connected to the content. There's this level of immersion that you get in VR, which is very different to classroom or e-learning. And interestingly, cost effective at scale. So they were able to show that if you were, 375, 400, let's say, learners, it was more cost effective than classroom. And that number obviously increases if you're looking at more traditional e-learning. But I think VR is the headsets, the price of the headsets has come down. And these kind of KPIs relative to our more traditional ways of learning, be it digital learning, e-learning, where you're sort of stepping through slides or interacting one way with your PC, and even classroom held up as the gold standard as the only way to learn for many years. I think that's one area which is something that you should, if you're not ready to step in, you should at least be tracking.
Fantastic. Patrick, could you tell us a little bit about the social learning platform that the project that I know won lots of awards and highly recognised globally that you did with Swisscom? Because I know a bit about it, but certainly not everybody will be aware of what that was and how it works.
Yeah, so we implemented what we called the Airbnb of corporate learning. So we had a social learning marketplace that consisted out of two parts, one part being the employees and the other part being training content. So training content, that could be anything, classroom training, e-learning, webinars, it could be externally purchased content, internally produced, role-based, theme-based, it didn't matter, it's just content. And the other side were the employees. Now, an employee, they want to secure their employability, they want to improve their performance, they want to learn from each other. And Swisscom as an employer, they want to be an attractive employer. So what do we as a L&D team then need to do to bring those two markets together? Well, because the organization was going through so many changes over the past 10 years, nowadays they make 70% of their turnover through products and services that did not exist 10 years ago. And that's already a huge shift in skills that are required. Next to that, they are also starting to try out agile forms of working, so middle management layers were starting to disappear. And all of that is resulting in employees being scared, thinking, do I still have a job tomorrow? So if you want to enable such a social collaborative marketplace, the first thing you need to do is you need to start to address those type of issues, which has got nothing to do with learning. But if you don't, people are not willing to start sharing. So the second thing that we needed to focus on is that everything that was created on that platform was supporting a business goal. So if it was not, improving margins, if it was not improving turnover, not improving customer NPS, and, then there was just no point of doing a training. And what that in effect means is you need to start educating the organization. Where is learning really used? When do you use it? So I just went around and tell everybody, don't learn anything and don't train anybody. Because what does an organization really want to do? It wants to grow sustainably. And the way it can do that is through two ways, either operational excellence or innovation. And those two are accelerated the most by having mature processes, mature tools, and knowing that people can collaborate together. if those three things are aligned and mature enough, then it starts to make sense to put new skills into the mix. And in order to start to get people to produce content and start sharing their knowledge, it's making it as easy as possible for somebody to create a blended learning training. And so we had a 45-minute trainer handbook as an e-learning that the employee could go through. Then that would enable them to create a draft training, and then they could come to us, and we had 4 coaches in my team and myself, and we would take them by the hand from that point to the training actually being delivered. And we would do that one time, maybe a second time if there was a business need for that. But in this way, we started to enable the organization to really teach and learn from each other. And what we saw is that the content that the people were generating was much better received and more valued than what a central L&D team was producing before we launched it.
Interesting.
I love that story, Patrick. I love it because what you're talking about there is how people are emotionally invested all the way through that process. It goes back to what you were saying, Sarah, about VR, that you have an emotional reaction to that learning environment. And when somebody's emotionally invested in something, then they just care more. And so you suddenly change the approach. So like I said earlier, don't go and ask somebody what learning do you want, ask them what problems you're trying to solve, and you get an entirely different way forward.
And this was also the way how we internally sold it because I often had the question, how do you motivate people to actually start sharing their knowledge and start producing content? They did not get any additional time off. There was no cost center where they could put that work on. We just had the simple pitch. Are you getting the same question 10 times a month? Why not create a small training out of it and put it on the academy? And then you got rid of this question forever.
Yeah.
And what that actually does is that people have a pain with getting the same question over and over again. They one time produce this training content, and they find out that actually producing training content is not that difficult. And afterwards, they are experiencing the benefit of training other people by the amount of time that they are personally saving. And then it just starts to snowball.
Fascinating. We've got a question from Catalin Simon. Hi, Catalin. It's been a while since we spoke. I hope you're well. So the question is, what's the panel's view on L&D post-COVID? I don't know who wants to go first.
Can I shout? We've actually just released a literature review at the CIPD of exactly this. So literature review of all of the research that's gone on in the past few months around what L&D looks like in a post-COVID world. And I think fundamentally the research is showing that it will never be the same again, which makes me really happy because I've been banging on about changing it for years. But it won't go back to how it was. And I think the biggest difference will be the knowledge transfer will happen in a digital way and happen at a point of need way. People have really got used to that now. And we were always used to this in our private lives. In our private lives, we didn't go on a course. We didn't wait 6 weeks to go on the course. We asked our network and we Googled it and, investigated ourselves. So we've got the digital skills to do that as human beings, and we translate that to the workplace. It means that now we've got the opportunity to really bring them to the fore. But going back to a point that was made earlier about the sudden outburst of buying stuff or trying to make it work, I think it will be more consolidated and it will be more thought out and a little bit more of a strategic approach. So I think we're going to see a bit of a lull before we see another driver of what does it look like in a post-COVID world where people are deciding, we'll ditch that one and we'll bring this one on board. That's my opinion anyway. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I think don't let a good crisis go to waste here. I think one of the things that I've been banging on about for a while, is that there are kind of two fundamental mindsets that we all need to operate successfully in our turbulent world. One is our ability to embrace change, and the second is to have a growth mindset. And many, many, many more people over the past year have done both of those things fantastically. And so really taking a more meta look at what we need to help our employees, help our leaders be successful in a world, because we've just done it, will give it more momentum and more weight, if you like, in terms of prioritization moving forward.
Excellent. So I've actually got a question for you, actually, because I know this is really where you're really, I know L&D overall, but where you're really passionate is around sort of leadership development. So the question I've got is, can leadership development be effectively performed virtually?
So, well, yeah, I've got to say yes, because I run an edtech company. No, but I think like with most things, there's no yes, no answer. I think on the pro side, if you think about what most leadership is happening now is virtually. So the ability to learn, practice, adopt new approaches in a virtual environment, delivered virtually, why wouldn't you? So I think that there's some basic mechanics around the answer that suggests, yes. And I think you're also seeing the possibility to capture interactions on video, deliver more scale, and start to amass data sets that you didn't have previously about your learning experiences because they took place in a hotel ballroom, beyond the eyes of, and I'm not sort of suggesting that privacy is breached, but there are a lot more data access points that can improve L&D's view moving forward. And I would say on the downside, we talked a little bit about the coffees and the breaks and the nice lunches and so on. I do think that there's some informal networking that takes place in those offsite in-person sessions, and some human bonding and relationship building that's very, very difficult to create in a Zoom environment. And I think we will see a more hybrid approach of that when the world sort of comes back to normal. And something Michelle mentioned earlier is this reflection. Reflection is so important to embedding the learning that we have. And I think, if you're, I'm going to, finish the thing here and go and do supper for, the kids. And where's my time to reflect on this great learning that I've had from my peers, on this panel today? And so I think when you are offsite on a couple-day training program, that space to be able to reflect and have some breakthrough moments is gone. And how to engineer that within your learning program, virtual learning program, is something that I think needs more thought.
I was going to disagree with you, but you just saved it the last minute there, Sarah. You need to engineer it in. That's the point, that we can't just pretend it happens naturally, because it doesn't necessarily. We get lost in the busyness of the day. And so when we offer a truly hybrid or a blending of learning, we offer the opportunity for that to come together. And, maybe it's a community of practice, or, we're seeing a bit of a resurgence in action learning sets where people are coming together.
Nice, yeah.
And action learning sets have been around for donkey's years, but you kind of don't really hear about it very much anymore. You can do a really good action learning set in a virtual environment. You can get all pile in Zoom and someone poses the problem, and then you discuss the problem and come up with the answers through the questioning. So some people used to say coaching could never be taught in this way, but to your point that we are having to coach others and we're having to be coached in this way, it's almost like a meta level of learning. You're in the thing to learn the thing.
That's a great point.
It's got to happen, and it is happening, and it will continue. A genuine believer.
Excellent. Another question that I've got is around, it's something somebody I spoke to the other day was talking about in terms of evaluation, and how do you really evaluate? Because one of the issues that I think L&D is, and we talked about it a little bit as well earlier on in the show, about how do you really evaluate the business impact of the thing that you've done. So you've got a strategy, you've put in place, perhaps some implementations or interventions that you want, but how do you measure actually the business impact of the strategy and what you're trying to execute? And I know when I spoke to you, this is something that people have struggled with a lot in L&D. So what advice would you give to somebody in L&D or is responsible for the strategy for L&D about how to evaluate the effectiveness of what they're doing?
Patrick, are you going to pick this one up? Because this is your bag, really, isn't it? In that, I'm just thinking about when you said it's not about learning, it's about business problems, it's about business. That's the evaluation, isn't it?
Yes. Actually, I heard this great slogan from a peer of mine, and that goes like this: from learning to earning. And it's and in that there's all the truth that anybody needs to understand in L&D, because if you start to look at what is the impact of a learning intervention, then this is going to be completely impossible to correlate that specific learning intervention with a specific business outcome. But if you start to look at the problem from a different perspective, and you look at, well, what is the business problem that we're trying to solve? So maybe the margins are not good enough and we want to increase those margins by X%. Then you start to look at the problem, okay, well, how can we solve that problem? And if we don't have, a part of the skills that we need for solving that problem, how much would it cost to get somebody to that level? And then it starts to, become a business discussion that is where learning is a result of solving that specific problem, rather than, oh, let's learn something and then see what we can do with it. So it's actually by taking the reverse look at it, rather than, oh, let's train something and maybe we can do something with it.
It's the change, isn't it, from just in case, we train people just in case you might need it, as opposed to just in time, where we need it at this moment in time because we're solving a particular business issue. It's a different way of looking at the same thing.
And so just to continue a little bit on that point, and also the statement or the question, how is L&D going to look post-COVID? My personal opinion is L&D is still going to look exactly the same like it was pre-COVID. As long as L&D heads are not thinking about solving business problems, the fundamentals are still going to be the same. The only difference is going to be that now they have got a set of additional digital tools that is going to allow them to execute their old strategy that is still not working, but in a more accelerated way. And if we really want to start to advance L&D, you need to start to think about, for example, one way would be, what is the business model of my L&D team? How are we creating value inside the organization? What value propositions do we have? What partnerships do we use, and so on?
It's very similar, I suppose, to HR as well. I think if you talk to a HR business partner or the people that are working with HR business partners, the key bit is always about, well, what is the business impact of what you're doing? And, are you just basically pushing process because that's the, legislation, which is fine, that needs to be done. Which kind of, it's the same sort of issue. How do you sort of evaluate the worth in what you're doing, the purpose of what you're doing, and why you're doing the thing that you're doing it? So I'm very wary of time, because we said that this would be a 45-minute show, and we're now coming up to 47 minutes. We haven't gone through our truths, but just want to mention about the business partner piece. So our next show on the 14th of April is actually around, is it time to say goodbye to the HR business partner? And we've got Tom Hack from the HR Trends Institute, Beth Evans, did a lot of work with business partners in terms of training them, and also Kerry Goodman, who was a HR business partner, became a HR director, and actually took out the business model within her organisation. It's a very interesting case study from there. So that's on the 14th of April. As I say, if you're on YouTube, you can certainly hit subscribe and then hit that icon as well to make sure that you don't miss out on that show. It will go on to LinkedIn. It will go on to our Facebook page as well. So just a nod in the direction of that show. But let's go to our truths and finish off our game that we're playing. So 2 lies, 1 truth. So this is really where we find out what people are and who they are. So I think, if I remember rightly, Sarah, you went first. And can you remind us the 3 aspects that you said, the two lies and 1 truth?
Yes. In the Guinness Book of Records for doing a 48-hour hockey marathon. Travel a lot to the Gulf, and my Arabic's not too bad. And I've got a twin sister, Shan, who used to play in a punk rock band.
Okay. What are people's thoughts? Michelle, Patrick, what are you going for?
It's so
I go
hard.
for option number 2.
Option number
Arabic
2.
golf.
Arabic golf.
Arabic.
I don't know. Guinness Book of Records, maybe your record in hockey. You tell them so beautifully. I just don't know.
So absolute poker face from Sarah. So I'm going to go with the Arabic, that you can speak some Arabic and you go to the Gulf, because I think I know that about you a little bit. So I'm going to go with that. Although it could be the other ones, but I'm going to go with the Arabic Gulf one. What's the answer, Sarah? Please do.
And my sister, Michelle, is correct. I did a 48-hour hockey marathon. My Arabic's limited to about 5 words.
I think that was a red herring for Patrick and I, because we were probably
totally.
Well, you've got to tell partial truth, right?
Yeah. Well done, Michelle, on that one. And then next we did have you, Michelle. So remind us of your 3.
I taught English in Japan. I have run an apprenticeship program, and I've got 4 dogs.
Oh, they're really tough. I think it could be all of those.
They're all lies.
What are Sarah, Patrick? What are you thinking?
Here's where we find out Michelle is a compulsive
Didn't
liar.
understand the game.
None of them is true. I know there's a dog. I just don't know if there's 4.
Yes, this
would
is
say
where
4
I'm going to
dogs.
go. It's the 4 dogs. I think
You're
that
saying
might be
4
a
dogs.
slight exaggeration.
I'm going to go the taught English in Japan, because that seems the most random to me. So I'm just going to go the most random one. So that my answer is the English in Japan, and you guys are going with the 4 dogs.
The dogs.
Tell us, Michelle.
I did used to teach English in Japan.
Oh, excellent.
Japanese is about your Arabic. And I actually do have dogs. You'll have heard them both breaking in. I've got 2 big dogs and 1 little dog. I have 3, not 4.
3.
When before lockdown, when my parents were out and about, we would have their dog as well. So yes, it's not unknown to have 4, 5, 6 dogs in this house.
Right. What breeds of dog do you have, Michelle?
I've got a Wire-haired Dachshund. She's a little one, miniature, and we've got a Cocker Spaniel. He's the old boy. He's 14, and my mum has his sister. We bred him for Hearing Dogs for Deaf People, a great charity that's provide dogs to support people with their hearing challenges. And I've got a Lurcher Cross Great Dane.
Oh wow! Mm-hmm. Wow!
Wow! He's a big lad then.
Open the
very different sizes of dogs. So I've got a cockapoo, Geordie, who occasionally people see when they do video meetings with me, and he just decides to open the door, and people are a bit confused as to whether it's a ghost or a dog. He's so small they can't see him. Oh, no, that's the dog. They're like, oh, okay. So yeah, I had somebody really freaked out when there was nobody there, and the door just opened on its own accord. Patrick, tell us your 2 lies and 1 truth again. Remind us.
All right. I love Switzerland, but dislike traditional Swiss cuisine. I have an educational background in human resources, and I've seen over 100 edtech startups fail and succeed through an accelerator program.
What are you going for, ladies?
I think I might go for the middle one, because I remember Patrick saying something about not coming from this L&D kind of background, and I wonder if that's not a HR background as well, or if that's a bit of a red herring.
Sarah, what are your thoughts?
We went to a few drinks parties together, and I seem to remember you chowing down on some Swiss cuisine. You might not have liked it, but I'm going to say, and the truth, polite,
I think.
yes, the truth. I think the truth is the accelerator program. Lots of startups.
I'm torn between that one and the Swiss food thing. I know that he's done a lot of work with startups and advised a lot of startups in that.
Is it 100 though? That's the thing. I'm not sure.
That's quite a number. I'm actually going to go for the dislike of Swiss food. That's the one I'm going for. So that's my answer.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Leon, but I'm absolutely crazy for Rushdie, and I'm absolutely crazy for fondue. Yeah. And I don't have an educational background in human resources. I did general management, and I did marketing as a specialization because I was curious why people buy stuff. And the thing that's true is the accelerator program, and yes, it is over 100 edtech startups, because I was also part of the pre-selection, and then they got 25 to start with, and now it's the 4th year. So you see a lot of hopefuls come and go.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's right.
So mine were, I got kicked out of school for kicking the teacher. I forgot what my second one was.
It was poker. You were playing poker.
Oh, yes. That one must be the truth. I was playing poker with Jason in Las Vegas. I shouldn't have played poker. And then finally, I was trying to go to Newcastle upon Tyne to watch my beloved Newcastle, and ended up in Newcastle under Lyme. What are your thoughts?
So I'm going to go for the first one because I really want that to be true.
I'm going to go.
I was really sorry.
Sorry, go on.
Please, Michelle.
No, go ahead.
Is this British politeness? Please don't let the Dutch guy. No. I'm not falling for this trap.
Very good, but.
So I'll go then, and I'll be more Dutch. How about that? I'll be more direct. Right. I'm going to go for the third one. I went to university at Kiel, which is just down the road from Newcastle under Lyme, and I know people have gone to the wrong Newcastle. I know it's true. So I'm gonna say that that's true for you.
Yeah,
I also think option number 3, but I was so hoping that it was option number 2. That would have just been legendary.
So it's actually, I got kicked out of school for kicking the teacher. I know. It really is not the image
you got
I have as an
such a
adult.
good boy image, and underneath it all, Leon. I see you, my friend. I see you.
I was 7, and I was a bit unruly at school. I blamed it because I'm sort of blind and deaf. So I was really struggling at school at the time, and hadn't kind of got diagnosed with I don't know why that means I kicked the teacher, but I think I got very frustrated, and I think they were sort of, a bit frustrated with me, and I just kicked the teacher, and then my parents had to come pick me up, and I think they thought, what have we done? What have we got, this devil child? But I have to say, I wouldn't say that's reflective of me as a person, although I do play football, so I can kick quite well.
Hopefully not shins on the football pitch.
No, not people generally. So I just wanted to say, I'm very keen for people to be able to reach out to you if they've got questions. Obviously, we've got an audience live now, but of course, people watch this afterwards as well. So Those on LinkedIn, I've already connected with a lot of you on there, but I'm sure they can obviously reach out and connect with you. Sarah and Michelle, you both talked about your Twitter piece. So I'm trying to think how we can potentially get your @s into there. Maybe we could put that in the comments if you don't mind, so people can connect with you and follow you on Twitter. And yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to us for any advice on any of this sort of stuff, then please feel free to do so. Obviously, HR Recruitment Solutions, my company, we are working with HR professionals across the UK and internationally. So if anybody needs any support recruiting from that perspective, then please do let me know and get in contact, or if you're, of course, looking for your next HR opportunity as well. But I just like to say a huge thank you to all those that have watched. I hope that you'll join us for the next show on the 14th of April. And a huge thank you to you guys for taking your time to share with us some of your tips and ideas and things for L&D. Anybody else want to say anything before we say goodbye to everybody?
Thanks very much. It's been really lovely.
Thanks for having us.
Time with you guys.
It was a pleasure.
Good. Well, thank you all. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you on the 14th of April to discuss should we be saying goodbye to the HR business partner. Bye-bye.